What if everything we know about human history is wrong? What if we weren't the first intelligent beings on Earth, but a creation designed for a purpose that's been forgotten? Ancient Sumerian tablets, some of the oldest writings ever discovered, tell a story that sounds more like science fiction than mythology. A story of gods who came from the heavens, who shaped humanity in their own image. They called them the Anunnaki. You ever come across something so old, so mysterious, that it makes you question everything you've been taught about where we came from? For me, that was the story of the Anunnaki, the ancient gods of Sumer, said to have come from the stars and maybe even created us. Now, I'm not saying I believe every theory out there, but the more I read, the harder it is to just call it a myth. Because the Sumerians, one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, didn't just tell stories. They documented them in writing, thousands of years before the Bible. And in those writings, they describe something that sounds an awful lot like a creation experiment. Let's go back about 6,000 years to ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Out of nowhere, civilization appears. The Sumerians built cities, invented writing, tracked the stars, had complex laws, mathematics, irrigation, and even schools. And yet there's no clear trail showing how they got there. It's like humanity suddenly leveled up overnight. When historians asked the Sumerians where all their knowledge came from, their answer was simple. The gods gave it to us. And those gods were called the Anunnaki. In Sumerian, Anunnaki means those of royal blood, or those who came from heaven. They were the children of the great sky god Anu, powerful beings who came down to Earth to rule, to teach, and to shape humanity. There's Enlil, the stern god of air and authority. Enki, the god of wisdom, water, and creation, often portrayed as humanity's ally. And Ninhursag, the earth goddess, said to have helped form the first human bodies. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Sumerians didn't describe these gods as invisible spirits or floating energies. They described them as physical beings. They walked, they ruled, they built cities, and they interacted directly with humans. In the ancient tablets, specifically in texts like the Epic of Atrahasis, there's a creation story that's eerily detailed. It says that the Anunnaki were forced to do hard labor digging canals, maintaining the land, and eventually they grew tired of it. They rebelled. That's when Enki and Ninhursag came up with a plan. They would create workers to take over their labor. So, they took the essence of a god, some stories say the blood or spirit, and mixed it with the clay of the earth. They shaped the first human being and brought it to life. That being was called Adamu. And yes, that word sounds a lot like Adam. The resemblance to the biblical story is impossible to ignore. Clay, divine essence, creation, the garden. It's as if the same event was remembered across different cultures, each retelling it in their own way. The ancient Sumerian texts describe the creation of humans as a deliberate act of genetic engineering, not a mystical or symbolic birth, but a biological project designed to solve a practical problem. The Anunnaki needed a workforce. They began with a being already native to Earth, described as a primitive creature, sometimes called the Lulu Amelu, meaning mixed worker. This being was intelligent but wild, closer to an early hominid than a modern human. Enki, known as the god of wisdom and science, proposed combining the genetic material of this earthly creature with the essence of the gods, what we might today call DNA. The Sumerian term used in the tablets is Te-mus, often translated as that which houses life. This is believed to refer to the life code or seed of the gods, something strikingly similar to the concept of genetic material. Enki and the goddess Ninhursag, also known as Ninma, carried out the experiment in a special chamber described as a house of Shimti, meaning the house where the breath of life is infused. The language implies a TAS, kind of laboratory, a controlled environment where life was created and modified. They mixed the clay of earth, the body, with the blood of a god, the divine element. This wasn't symbolic to the Sumerians. It was literal. They believed that human beings were a fusion of terrestrial matter and divine essence, the clay that was bound by the blood of the gods. The blood was said to come from a being called Geshtui, one of the Anunnaki who possessed great intelligence. His blood, carrying the essence of divine awareness, was mixed into the genetic material that formed the first human prototype. The resulting creature was brought to life not through magic, but through a process the texts describe as awakening the life spirit. The goddess Ninhursag carried the new being to term in her womb, possibly a metaphor for an artificial gestation or cloning process, and when it was born, it could stand, speak, and understand basic commands. But it was sterile. The first humans couldn't reproduce. The Anunnaki had to keep creating new workers by hand. That wasn't sustainable, so Enki made further genetic adjustments. The next versions, the Adamu and Tiamat, were designed to reproduce naturally, ensuring that the worker race could multiply on its own. Once the project succeeded, humans were placed in the Eden, a lush region described as a plain near the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, a word that would later evolve into Eden. This explains why the Sumerian accounts describe humans as created to bear the burden of the gods. It wasn't meant as punishment, it was our original purpose. Over time, humans began to learn from their creators. Enki, who had always favored humanity, secretly shared knowledge with them: agriculture, writing, astronomy, medicine, giving us the tools to build civilization. To the Sumerians, the Anunnaki weren't gods in the spiritual sense. They were engineers of life beings who blended science and divinity, shaping a new species that carried both the Earth's DNA and the breath of the gods. Now, fast forward to modern times. Writer Zecharia Sitchin reinterpreted these ancient stories through a modern, almost scientific lens. He suggested that the Anunnaki weren't mythical gods at all, but extraterrestrial visitors from a distant planet called Nibiru, a world that supposedly orbits our sun every 3,600 years. According to his theory, the Anunnaki came to Earth around 450,000 years ago, searching for gold, not for wealth, but to repair their planet's atmosphere. When the work became too demanding, they genetically modified early humans, possibly Homo erectus, to create a smarter, stronger worker. The tablets describe early failures, beings who couldn't reproduce or survive, but after many trials, they succeeded. They called their creation Lulu, meaning the mixed one, and that, Sitchin said, was us Homo sapiens. As time passed, humans multiplied. They learned quickly, building cities, tending fields, and worshipping their creators as gods. But then, something shifted. The humans became too noisy. The tablets say too independent. Enlil, the strict one, grew angry and decided to wipe them out. He unleashed plagues, droughts, and finally the Great Flood. Enki, the compassionate god, warned one man, Atrahasis, to build a boat and save his family. Sound familiar? That story later became the biblical tale of Noah. It's almost as if these ancient myths are early records of real events that were retold for thousands of years, evolving each time until they became the religious stories we know today. The ancient texts say that after the flood, the Anunnaki divided the earth among themselves and ruled for generations, but eventually they left. They ascended to the heavens, leaving humanity to grow on its own. After the flood, according to Sumerian texts, the earth entered a new age. Civilizations rose again, this time with humans at the center, but the gods, the Anunnaki, began to withdraw. The ancient writings describe a time when the gods ruled directly over humanity, each city under the patronage of one Anunnaki lord. Enlil ruled from Nippur, Enki from Eridu, Inanna from Uruk, and so on. But gradually, their direct presence faded. The tablets grow quieter. The gods stop walking among men, and their once mighty chariots of the sky the Shems, or Mu, the Sumerians wrote about were no longer seen. Some researchers, like Zakaria Sitchin, believe the Anunnaki's departure was linked to the long orbit of their home world, Nibiru. If Nibiru indeed exists, and if its orbit takes thousands of years to complete, then the Anunnaki may have simply returned home, waiting for their planet to once again draw near to Earth. The Sumerian king list, an ancient record of rulers spanning tens of thousands of years, adds a strange twist. It says, kingship descended from heaven, then the flood swept over. After the flood, kingship once again descended from heaven. In other words, the gods returned after the flood, re-established rule, and then, once their time was done, withdrew once more. So where did they go? Some tablets suggest they left behind their offspring demigods, or hybrid rulers, who maintained power in their name. These lineages may have formed the basis for the divine right of kings, seen throughout later civilizations. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs were called sons of the gods. In Mesopotamia, rulers claimed descent from the sky beings. Even in the Bible, there are echoes of this. There were giants in those days. The sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. Some believe that's a direct remnant of the Anunnaki story rewritten and reshaped over millennia into religious text. But here's where things get even stranger. The Sumerian texts hint that the Anunnaki promised to return, that their appointed time would come again, when Nibiru completed its orbit and approached Earth once more. Sitchin and later researchers connected this idea with modern astronomy, suggesting that a massive, unseen planet might indeed be moving through the outer reaches of our solar system. NASA itself has occasionally referred to this hypothetical body as Planet 9, a world so distant it would take thousands of years to make a single trip around the sun. Sound familiar? And then there's 3I Atlas, a mysterious interstellar object that some speculate could be an artificial craft or even a precursor. If the Anunnaki really left thousands of years ago, could something like Atlas be their return signal, a way to observe Earth before they arrive? Even in Sumerian lore, before the gods returned, signs were said to appear in the skies. Bright comets, celestial messengers, and lights that the priests interpreted as omens. Of course, not everyone takes these stories literally. Some scholars say the Anunnaki were never gods or aliens, but metaphors for natural forces, or ancient rulers deified over time. Still, the precision and consistency in the Sumerian writings leave a lingering question. How did a civilization over 6,000 years ago know about the planets, genetic creation, and celestial cycles unless someone told them? When you connect the dots from the tablets to the myths to what's being discovered in space today, the story begins to sound less like legend and more like memory. Maybe the Anunnaki never truly left. Maybe they've been watching. Maybe the stories they left behind were never meant to be myth, but a warning or a promise that one day the gods who shaped humanity would walk the earth again. But there's an eerie line in some of those writings, a promise that they would return. And that's where the fascination with Nibiru continues. Every time astronomers find an odd object moving through our solar system like 3I Atlas or Oumuamua, the question rises again. Are these just space rocks? Or signs of something? Or someone returning? Now, to be fair, mainstream science doesn't support Sitchin's theory. There's no confirmed evidence of Nibiru, and no trace of alien DNA in our genome. But there are mysteries. Why did civilization appear so suddenly in Sumer? Why did so many ancient cultures across the world tell stories of gods descending from the sky, teaching humanity, and returning to the stars? Maybe the Anunnaki weren't beings in spaceships. Maybe they represent something cosmic, the spark of awareness, the moment we became conscious of ourselves and began asking why. Whether you see them as gods, aliens, or symbols of creation, the Anunnaki left behind a legacy that shaped human imagination forever. Their story reminds us that humanity has always searched for meaning for the moment, when something greater touched the earth and gave us purpose. Maybe the truth isn't that we were created to serve them. Maybe the truth is that through their story, we learned to question, to seek, and to create for ourselves. So what do you think? Were the Anunnaki real visitors from the stars? Ancient gods from another world? Or are they the reflection of something hidden deep within us, the memory of our own awakening? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through ancient history and mystery, please like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. Until next time, keep looking up and keep questioning everything.